The Grand Galactic Council chamber was, in a word, excessive. Floating crystals hummed with bioluminescent light, casting dramatic shadows across the circular assembly floor. Holographic displays flickered with data streams from 1,000 worlds, and the air itself seemed to shimmer with the kind of self-importance only achievable when you represent 700 distinct civilizations. Today, however, the usual somber atmosphere of interstellar politics had been replaced with something that could only be described as a party. Well, an alien bureaucrat's version of a party, which meant there were refreshments that looked vaguely toxic and several species were making sounds that might have been laughter or possibly digestive distress. Hard to tell, really. At the center of this questionable celebration stood Ambassador Threx Kal of the Zeltharian Collective, all four of his chitinous arms spread wide in a gesture of triumph that his species had perfected over millions of years of being absolutely insufferable. His compound eyes gleamed with what could only be described as smug satisfaction, and his mandibles clicked together in a rhythm that his people considered eloquent. To everyone else, it sounded like someone typing very aggressively on a keyboard made of bones. "Esteemed colleagues," Threx Kal announced, his translator rendering his clicks into a voice that somehow managed to sound condescending in 700 languages simultaneously. "Today marks a momentous occasion in galactic history. 50 standard years have passed since the crimson flux swept through human space. 50 years of silence. 50 years of peace." A ripple of approval moved through the chamber. The Vorgothi delegation, gelatinous beings who communicated through color changes, flashed a particularly smug shade of purple. The crystalline Asherii chimed in harmonic agreement. Even the normally reserved Korathi, who looked like somebody had given an octopus both anxiety and a business degree, seemed to relax their tentacles slightly. "The scourge of humanity," Threx Kal continued, warming to his subject like a professor who has finally gotten to his favorite lecture, "that aggressive, unpredictable, utterly chaotic species has been wiped from the galactic stage. No more do we worry about their reckless expansion. No more do we endure their baffling cultural practices or their disturbing fondness for things they call pets. The plague that we feared would spread has instead done us an unexpected favor. It contained itself to human space and solved our, how shall I put this diplomatically, our human problem. Oh, the irony was so thick you could cut it with a plasma torch. If only someone had thought to check whether the humans were actually dead before breaking out the celebration beverages. But where would be the fun in that? To understand why the council was currently popping bottles of fermented algae extract, or whatever passed for champagne among species that breathed methane, we need to rewind a bit. 50 years ago, the crimson flux had emerged from some forgotten corner of the galaxy like that one relative who shows up uninvited to every family gathering and immediately makes everything worse. The plague was, by all scientific measurements, an absolute masterpiece of biological horror. It rewrote genetic code like a particularly aggressive editor with a red pen and no sense of mercy. The Korvax, a species known for their robust immune systems and general hardiness, had been reduced from billions to mere thousands in 18 months. The elegant Silurians, who had survived 3 previous extinction events on their homeworld, were wiped out entirely. Even the Zeltharians, with their distributed nervous systems and redundant organs, had lost 30% of their population before they managed to synthesize a working vaccine. When the flux hit human space, the Council had done what any rational collection of civilizations would do. They had slammed the quarantine protocols down faster than you could say, "interstellar incident," and backed away slowly. All jump gates leading to human territory were shut down. All trade routes were severed. The 37 human colonies and Earth itself were sealed off like a particularly dangerous biohazard, which, to be fair, they were the Council's best scientists, and we are talking about beings who could calculate the trajectory of a comet while simultaneously solving complex political equations and breathing through their skin, had run the numbers. The crimson flux had a 99.9% mortality rate among humans. Those were not survival odds. Those were extinction odds with a margin of error so small it was basically a mathematical formality, and then, silence. 50 years of absolutely nothing from human space. No distress calls, no desperate pleas for aid, no emergency broadcasts. The council monitored every frequency, every possible communication channel. Static. White noise. The cosmic equivalent of a dial tone to nowhere. Clearly, obviously, indisputably, humanity was gone. I mean, what else could 50 years of radio silence possibly indicate? Certainly not that humans were too busy solving their own problems to bother calling. That would require a level of stubborn self-reliance that surely no species could possess. Right? Spoiler alert, wrong. Threxkal was just reaching the crescendo of his speech, mandibles clicking with the kind of theatrical flair that suggested he had practiced this moment in front of a mirror, when the alarm started screaming, not the polite, dignified chiming that usually indicated a scheduled arrival. No, these were the full-blown, existential crisis in progress alarms that made every species in the chamber instinctively check for exits. Holographic displays flickered and died, replaced by flashing red warnings that transcended language barriers. The universal symbol for "oh no, oh no, oh no" plastered itself across every screen. Multiple unscheduled FTL signatures detected, the chamber's AI announced with the kind of calm that only artificial intelligence could maintain during a potential apocalypse. Origin point, former human quarantine zone. Classification, military vessels. Count, 37 and climbing. You could have heard a pin drop, if pins made sounds in the vacuum of space, and if anyone in the room was still capable of motor functions. Threxkal's mandibles froze mid-click. The Vorgothi delegation turned a color that their species reserved for moments of extreme confusion, something between beige and "I need an adult." One of the Korathi actually fainted, which for a tentacled species involved a lot more flopping than you might expect. The main view screen, which had been displaying a lovely montage of human free space, suddenly filled with ships. Not just any ships. Human ships. Sleek, angular, and bristling with enough weaponry to make even the most pacifistic species nervous. They hung in space just beyond the council station like uninvited guests at a funeral. Their funeral, specifically, the largest vessel, a dreadnought that looked like someone had designed a weapon and then remembered to add engines as an afterthought, drifted to the front of the formation. Emblazoned on its hull in letters large enough to read from 3 star systems away were the words, UNSC Lazarus. Because apparently, humans had developed a sense of irony to go along with their refusal to stay dead. Incoming communication request, the AI continued, still maintaining that irritating level of composure. Source, Flagship Lazarus. Captain Marcus Chen requesting immediate audience with the Galactic Council. Requesting. That was a polite word for what was happening. When you show up with 37 warships, requests become more like strongly worded suggestions backed by enough firepower to ruin everyone's day. Threxkal stared at the screen, his compound eyes somehow managing to convey the expression of someone whose entire worldview was currently being drop-kicked into a black hole. Around him, 700 civilizations collectively realized they had made what military strategists call a significant miscalculation, and what everyone else calls a monumentally stupid assumption. The communication request blinked on the screen, patient and persistent, someone was going to have to answer it. The doors to the council chamber opened with a hiss that sounded almost apologetic, as if the station itself knew it was about to host the galaxy's most awkward reunion. Captain Marcus Chen strode in like he owned the place, which, given the fleet parked outside, was not entirely inaccurate. He was tall for a human, with close-cropped black hair going silver at the temples and the kind of easy confidence that came from having survived something that should have killed him. Twice. He wore a uniform that was crisp, professional, and absolutely covered in more metals than seemed structurally sound. Behind him walked 6 other humans, each looking equally alive and equally unimpressed with the current situation. "Hello everyone," Chen said, his voice carrying across the chamber with the practiced ease of someone who had given this speech in his head about 1,000 times. "Sorry we are late to the party. We heard you were talking about us and figured we should crash. Hope you do not mind." The silence was deafening. Threxkal's mandibles moved but no sound came out, which was honestly an improvement. Chen's smile widened. "Oh wow, tough crowd. No applause for the dead guys walking? Come on, we brought party favors and everything. He gestured behind him where one of his crew members held up a container labeled, Crimson Flux Vaccine, Free Samples. This is impossible, Threx Kal finally managed, his translator crackling with what might have been static or possibly a nervous breakdown. The mortality rate was 99.9%. You should be extinct. The mathematics were irrefutable. Yeah, about that, Chen said, clasping his hands behind his back in a pose that military academies across human space had been teaching for centuries. Turns out 0.1% of 8 billion people is still 8 million survivors. And humans, well, we are funny about extinction. We tend to take it personally. A hologram flickered to life beside Chen, resolving into the image of a woman in a lab coat who looked like she had not slept in 5 years and was running purely on coffee and spite. Dr. Elena Volkov, she introduced herself without preamble. Chief Medical Officer, Human Resistance. Let me explain how your plague became our evolution. The council leaned forward despite themselves. Even existential dread could not overcome scientific curiosity. The Crimson Flux rewrites genetic code, yes? Volkov continued, pulling up holographic displays of DNA strands that twisted and reformed in real time. Nasty piece of work. Elegant design, really, if you are into biological warfare. But here is the thing about humans. We have been rewriting our own genetic code since before we left Earth. Medical technology, CRISPR modifications, cybernetic enhancements. We have been playing with our biology for centuries. Chen took over, his tone shifting from casual to something darker. So when your plague hit, yes, it killed billions. We will not sugarcoat that. Those were our people, our families, our children. But the ones who survived were not just lucky. They were adapted. Modified. Stubborn enough to tell a genetic plague to go sit on a fusion reactor. We spent 50 years in quarantine, Volkov added, her hologram pacing like a professor warming to a lecture. Do you know what humans do when you lock them in a room with a problem? We solve it. We genetically modified our survivors. We adapted our immune systems. We turned your extinction event into the galaxy's most aggressive selective pressure. Every human standing here today is immune to the Crimson Flux. Actually, more than immune. We are carriers now. Harmless to us, still deadly to everyone else, but completely under our control. Chen's smile never wavered. We heard through the old monitoring stations that you were having a celebration. 50 years of peace, was it? That is sweet. Really warms the heart. So we thought, why not drop by and let you know that reports of our death were greatly exaggerated. The Vorgothi had turned a color that did not exist on their emotional spectrum chart. One of the Asherii was vibrating at a frequency that suggested internal screaming. Threx Kal looked like someone had just explained that everything he knew was wrong and also the universe was personally disappointed in him. You see, Chen continued, humans have this saying. What does not kill you makes you stronger. Your plague did not kill us. So now, we are back. And we need to talk. Now, I know what you are thinking, Chen said, gesturing casually as if he were discussing the weather rather than galactic-scale biological horror. He is bluffing. Humans cannot possibly have survived. This is some elaborate hoax. So, in the interest of diplomatic transparency, we brought visual aids. He snapped his fingers, and 3 more humans entered the chamber. They looked healthy, vibrant even, with the kind of glow that suggested excellent nutrition and a complete lack of extinction-level pathogens. Each wore a badge that read Patient 0.1% in several languages, including one that made the Zeltharians recoil. Meet Private Jessica Torres, Engineer David Okonkwo, and Dr. Yuki Tanaka, Chen announced like a game show host revealing prizes. All 3 were infected with the Crimson Flux during the initial outbreak. Torres here actually died for 4 minutes before we brought her back. Okonkwo lost 40% of his body mass. Tanaka's DNA was rewritten so many times we had to invent new medical terminology to describe what was happening to her. Dr. Volkov's hologram pulled up medical scans that made several council members turn away. As you can see from these readings, all three carry active crimson flux markers in their bloodstream. Right now. At this very moment. The virus is alive and replicating inside them. The chamber erupted in panic. Several species scrambled for breathing apparatus. The Karathi delegation tried to leave but got tangled in their own tentacles. Threxkael's exoskeleton actually creaked with tension. "Relax," Chen said, holding up a hand. "They are not contagious unless we want them to be. We have full control over viral shedding. But yes, every human here is technically a walking biological weapon." Surprise. Volkov continued with the clinical detachment of someone who had long since processed the implications and moved on to being vaguely amused by them. "The quarantine you imposed was actually the best thing you could have done for human evolution. Isolated population, extreme selective pressure, 50 years to adapt and modify. We essentially went through forced evolution on fast forward." Darwin would have been thrilled. Probably also horrified, but mostly thrilled. "Our immune systems did not just develop resistance," Private Torres spoke up, her voice steady. "We integrated the virus. Made it part of us. It is like having a guard dog made of aggressive RNA that only attacks on command." Chen walked slowly around the chamber floor, making eye contact with as many council members as their various anatomies allowed. "You see the irony, right? You quarantined us to prevent the spread of the plague. Instead, you gave us the perfect laboratory to master it. You wanted us contained, and we used that containment to become something you never anticipated. Something stronger." The Vorgothi had progressed to a color that linguists would later describe as existential mauve. Threxkael looked like he was recalculating every assumption he had ever made about biological limitations and coming up with errors in his math. "The thing about humans," Chen continued, his tone almost conversational now, "is that we are really, really good at spite-based survival. You know what kept us going during the worst years? The knowledge that everyone out here thought we were dead. That motivated us more than you can possibly imagine." Chen pulled out a data pad with the theatrical flair of a lawyer presenting damning evidence, which, in a way, he was. "Now that we have established that we are very much not extinct, let us discuss the terms of our return to galactic society. I have a list. Humans love lists." He tapped the pad, and holographic text materialized above the council floor in every major galactic language simultaneously. First, immediate restoration of all human territorial claims. Every colony, every outpost, every mining station we owned before the quarantine. Non-negotiable. Threxkael's mandibles clicked weakly. "But those systems have been reallocated. The Confederation claimed the mineral rights to New Terra. The Vorgothi have established settlements on 3 former human worlds. Then they can unestablish them," Chen replied with a smile that had no warmth whatsoever. "We will give them 60 standard days. We are not unreasonable." Second, he continued, scrolling through his list with evident satisfaction, full restoration of trade rights, shipping lanes, and diplomatic status. We will also require representation on this council. A permanent seat, naturally. With veto power. The chamber exploded with objections that sounded like a zoo during feeding time. If the zoo was populated entirely with bureaucrats having simultaneous nervous breakdowns, Chen waited for the noise to die down, then continued as if nothing had happened. Third, and this is my personal favorite, compensation for 50 years of economic isolation. We calculate the lost revenue at approximately 47 trillion credits. We accept payment plans. Interest rates are surprisingly reasonable given that we could just take what we want. This is extortion, Threxkael sputtered, all 4 arms gesticulating wildly. This is blackmail. This is completely outside the bounds of civilized diplomatic negotiation. No, Chen corrected, his tone hardening. This is what happens when you write off an entire species without checking if they are actually dead. Consider it a learning opportunity. We are even providing educational materials free of charge. He gestured to the warships visible through the viewport. Around the chamber, you could practically see the calculations happening. 700 civilizations doing the math on what a war with humanity would cost versus just giving them what they wanted. The numbers were not encouraging. Wars were expensive. Humans were apparently unkillable. The economics were simple, if deeply unsatisfying. The HFY delegation chimed softly, their crystalline bodies resonating with resignation. The Karathi turned a shade that indicated reluctant acceptance. Even the Vorgothi stopped cycling through panic colors and settled on something that roughly translated to, fine, whatever, just do not hurt us. HFY looked around the chamber, seeing no support, no backup, nothing but the cold reality of political calculation. His shoulders sagged, which was impressive given that his species did not technically have shoulders. The council will need time to deliberate these requests, he managed weakly. Demands, Chen corrected cheerfully. And you have 72 hours. We will be waiting. We have gotten very good at waiting. 72 hours later, the council voted to accept humanity's terms. The vote was not even close, which said everything about the persuasive power of 37 warships and a species too stubborn to die properly. Chen stood once more on the council floor, this time to accept the official documents restoring humanity to galactic society. He shook hands, tentacles, pseudopods, and one appendage that nobody was entirely sure about, with various ambassadors who all wore expressions of deep regret mixed with the relief of people who had narrowly avoided a catastrophically expensive war. Pleasure doing business with you all, Chen said, tucking the documents under his arm. We look forward to a long and mutually beneficial relationship. Try not to declare us extinct again. It is awkward for everyone. As he walked toward the exit, HFY called out weakly, Captain Chen, how did you know we were celebrating? Chen paused, grinning over his shoulder. We never stopped monitoring your communications. 50 years of silence does not mean we were not listening. We just did not have anything nice to say. The doors closed behind him with a final, definitive hiss. Outside the station, the human fleet hung in perfect formation against the stars, a reminder that humanity had returned and had no intention of leaving again. 37 ships, each named after concepts that should have killed them but did not. Lazarus. Phoenix. Resilience. Spite, and so the galaxy learned a lesson that would echo through history and be taught in diplomatic academies for generations to come: never, ever, assume humans are dead until you have checked the bodies. And even then, maybe check again. And possibly set up a perimeter. Just to be safe, because humans, as it turned out, were less of a species and more of a recurring problem that the universe had simply failed to solve. The council had tried extinction. It had not worked. Next time, they would probably try asking nicely first. HFY slumped in his seat, staring at the empty space where Chen had stood, contemplating a future where humanity was not just alive but aggressively so. Somewhere in the station, someone turned off the celebration music that had been playing on loop for 3 days. The party was officially over.